Howdy, howdy, hi everyone. Eugene with CustomBuiltMotorizedBicycles.com. Okay, today I'm going to show you how to repack your bearings with grease on a motorized bicycle. Of course, you remove your wheel. Let's remove the axle nut here. I use this bar here just to get a good grip on the brake arm. Use a 17mm wrench. Loosen up the nut that holds the brake arm in. Pull the brake arm off. The dust cap off. Now the dust cap, I cut it to where it fits inside of the hole in the sprocket and is allowed to rotate around. If you don't have it rotating around, it'll be bound up there and it'll make it hard to pedal, and it'll put a lot of excessive drag on the bike, on the motor. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to back up this nut here with a 17mm wrench. Here, and I'm going to rotate this here, which is going to unscrew the axle here, and I'm going to keep this piece in place here. I'm kind of cheating. There's a different way they recommend to service the bearing. Basically, it entails removing everything here on this side here from the axle and then putting everything back on. That to me is a little bit more labor than I want to go into. So I'm just going to screw the axle out here. Now I've got plenty of room here. Let's go to this side here. You've got a little bearing in here, and then we're going to turn the sprocket here counterclockwise, and there's another bearing in here. I'm going to pull the bearing out, try and get to it. Now this bearing has plenty of grease on it, but I'm just showing you how to do it. Put some grease inside there. I'm using a good high temp grease here, automotive high temp grease, and I've got a good bit of grease in there. I'm going to push the bearing back into place. Let's go ahead and screw the sprocket back in. When I'm screwing the sprocket in, I make sure I keep this piece here pushed in. I'll show you why here in just a minute. That'll keep everything in place. And I'm going to fish this little bearing out. And work a good amount of grease in the bearing, push it in to place, and then the cup that rides against the bearing, get some grease on that. Okay, so we got plenty of grease there. Now let's go back to the other side. This is where it can get a little bit tricky. Here, I'm going to simply push this out. What I don't want to do is rotate this. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyways. We're going to do it the hard way. Like I said, I'm doing this here the hard way, just so I can show you a little bit of detail here. Now this piece here has the 2 slots cut into it. Let's remove the bearing and see what we've got. Inside, you see you've got these 2 tabs here. These 2 tabs here have to go into this piece here. I have one brake shoe here and another brake shoe here. And then you have this fat piece here and this fat piece here. That has to go inside here. So you want to make sure that your brake pieces are, your brake pieces or shoes are pushed in all the way, and then you have an equal gap between them, and then you have the 2 tabs in the middle. So I'm going to coat my bearing with grease. Put a good amount of grease in here. I've got plenty of grease in there. Let's push the bearing in. Bearing is in. We're going to put grease on this piece here. Where this shoulder is, that's where the bearing rides, right there where my fingernail is. That's where we need the most of the grease. So if you keep the slots here in this piece aligned with the tabs, you push it straight out, you pull your bearing out, get grease in there, and then you can push this piece straight in like that. Then screw this side here in until your bearing seats. Show you what I'm doing here. I'm holding this piece here into place. What you don't want to do is over tighten this. The suggested way is to take it apart from the other side and use a special tool called a cone wrench to adjust your tension on your bearing. But I've been doing this long enough, I can get around it without it. Okay, now I've got it snug. I want to make sure that there's no wobble here. It's reasonably snug there. It turns. I give it a few turns. Check again for any that it's not loose. I'm grabbing the sprocket here. There's no side-to-side play. And I'm just getting it just hand tight, making sure that it still spins freely with very little resistance on the bearing. If you get it too loose and you have any wobble on it, you're going to have problems. So let's go ahead and get our bearing cap clean. I'll even put a little bit of grease in there. That'll help seal any dirt and crud out. Push that into place. Now it looks like my sprocket's shifted off a little bit. Not too much, I'm not too worried about that. Go ahead and put the brake arm on. Put the heavy washer on. The nut without the shoulder goes on. That's the larger nut as compared to the axle nut, which goes on over the frame of the bike. Get it tight. Double check that you have no play in your axle. I'm going to put the wrench on the nut here on the back side, and I'm going to use the brake arm to tighten it up a little bit, make sure that it's not binding. There's no play on it. I'm going to put my bar on this, my piece of tubing, a pipe here, and tighten this up. You have to be careful when you're doing this that you don't over tighten the bearing. I've got that very snug there. My bearing is free. There's just a little bit of play. So what I'm going to do now is put the wrench on the nut here on this side here. Grab the brake arm, turn it clockwise a little bit. Bearing is good and snug and tight. And we're ready to go ahead and put this back on the bike. You want to grease your bearings, I'd say about every 3 months, depending upon how much you ride it. If you ride it a lot, I recommend doing it even every month. If you're putting 10, 20 miles a day on your bike, I would recommend doing it every 4 weeks. That way your bearings you'll get your maximum life out of your bearings, and as well keep your bike running good. Always check and make sure that you don't have any wobble here in the sprocket. As well, move the wheel on the bike and make sure that you don't have any play in there. Otherwise you need to come back and tighten up your bearing assembly. I want to thank you for watching. If you like it, give me a thumbs up. Click subscribe. Thanks for watching.